Hello and welcome to SAE Tomorrow Today. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Brent Yacobucci, Chair, SAE Washington DC Section. Brent, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
It's great to have you here. You currently serve as the chair of the SAE section for DC. How did you first start your SAE journey?
I was, an engineer by training, but wound up in the policy world and wound up with a job as an analyst with the Congressional Research Service, looking at things like fuel economy regulations and legislation, vehicle emissions, these sorts of things. And mostly what I was doing was attending things like the government industry meeting, uh, the World Congress, just to talk to the engineers and folks who are actually doing the physical work to meet some of these standards and learning from them. So for many years, it was just attending those events was really my connection to SAE.
And is research a passion at your core? And I ask that because your day job, you're at the wonderful Library of Congress, which has incredible research available.
Yeah, it's something that I fell into this job. I came to the Congressional Research Service and the Library of Congress right after grad school, and like most folks my age at the time, I thought, yeah, I'll work this job a few years and then go do something different. And that was 27 years ago. So apparently I kind of like it. And there have been opportunities to grow and advance in the position. I'm now on the management side. So instead of doing the day-to-day research and analysis for Congress, I'm leading a team that's doing that research across the whole energy space. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of educational aspects to it. Teaching congressional staffers and members about different technologies and how how they affect just everyday life and their constituents, but also how they interact with the economy and how legislation and regulation might change that. It's been a really interesting and dynamic place to work for a long time.
You can summarize it this way: there's a lot of moving parts. I think that's probably the easiest.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, and that's I think that's one of the interesting things about being an engineer in the policy space is, yeah, all the moving parts, looking at the technology and the science as it's evolving while dealing with the economics and the law and just the social aspects, especially if you're talking about mobility, because there are just so many ways people interact with their vehicles, ground, land, what have you, or wind, or ground or air, what have you.
Do you feel that being an engineer gives you a competitive advantage for your role because you're looking at things differently? You have the experience from GI, WCX, so you're taking in, I'll say, a wide variety of experiences and knowledge into what you're doing.
I think so. I think it's also, as engineers, we're trained to think about systems, and whether that system is the drivetrain of a car or the propulsion system for a jet or a set of policies around a topic, there are all these parts and all the ways they interact, and thinking about trying to design that whole system so that it works and avoid unintended consequences. So I think it's useful to bring that mindset to public policy.
How important would you say, rated on a scale of 1 to 10, for an engineer to have what's this called, a general understanding of policy? Because you can make the world's greatest widget, and if the policy says no, the world's greatest widget's no longer the world's greatest widget.
I think there's real value in understanding the policy, understanding um, how and why some of these rules exist. I had an interesting conversation when I was in Detroit. This was a dozen years ago, at one of the OEMs, and some of their engineers still referred to the brake light that's in the center of the rear of the car, either at the rear windshield or down at the base, as this new thing we have to put in. And even then, it had been 15, 20 years since that rule had been enacted. And so, you know, I think sometimes engineers, not just engineers, sort of anyone who's building things gets used to how they build things and doesn't necessarily want to change, but there's real value potentially to that change. I mean, my understanding is having that additional light improves safety, and we want our cars to be safer, and that's sort of driven by policy. And so understanding that is, I think, important, just to understand why and how these things are evolving, as opposed to just some person in Washington deciding to make life harder for the manufacturers or for the engineers trying to get these vehicles built.
No, you bring up a very valid point. I'll call it adaptation. So, obviously, times change. We turn the calendar, we turn the years, we turn the decades. Things change, things progress. And then it seems that, and I'll give you an example. So, last night, my father in law came over for dinner and he said, he just bought a new house. And he said, Can you put the edge in the house? And I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm actually pretty smart. And I couldn't figure out how to get the navigation to work. I was like, this thing is so antiquated, and the car is 2 years old. And when I get in my car, I just hit the button and say, "Okay, take me home," and it goes. It just seems
Mm-hmm.
that it seems like there's a disconnect there from an adaptation standpoint to where all this technology is going, and to some individuals that are building it are kind of saying, "Okay, this is the box. This is how we build it. This is how we ship it." How do they get out of that?
Well, I think it's something we are always facing. Technology is always changing. I think the real challenge these days is just how quickly things change. I was at an event at a party at a friend's house the other day, and there was an older gentleman who was just trying to figure out how to do something with his phone, and just how much our cell phones have changed from the last few years to these years. You get a new version and it's different, and it's happening so rapidly, when for decades your phone was just a phone and it was stuck to the wall at your house, and you would have never had this conversation. And in fact, they probably would have taken you to the insane asylum if you said something like, I need a new phone because I want a better camera. And just our phones do so many different things. They connect to our cars, they connect to our houses, they allow us to stay in constant communication, but the apps are always updating, the operating system is always updating. And so I think we all, whether engineers or not, I think we all feel like technology is moving really fast, and what we knew about computers or programming or what have you, even if it's a few years old, can feel outdated. And I think it's hard, it's difficult. I think for all of us, I think there's a particular need for engineers to stay up to date and stay on top of things. But it's something we all face.
I remember when Dick Tracy was just a comic book, and then it became a movie with Warren Beatty and Madonna, and that watch was the coolest thing in the world. Wow, you can call somebody. And now, lo and behold, everybody pretty much has an Apple Watch. It's truly amazing. But
Mm-hmm.
at the center of this, which you alluded to earlier, is policy. The engineers have to understand all of these different elements of where it's going. And how do you think they adapt that mindset of staying ahead of the curve? Because Gretzky had that great line: "Skate to where the puck's going, not to where the puck is." How do you think an engineer can adapt that mindset? Because I believe, this is my personal opinion, that the 7 year cycle for um, automotive is going away and changing.
I think we all just need to be prepared for changes. And I think some historical perspective is helpful there. I was talking to my brother the other day, he's a real car nut, and we were talking about, for some reason, carburetors came up, and there's just nothing any car that's been manufactured in the last 20 years has. Like every vehicle, assuming it's an internal combustion engine, has fuel injectors. There's no carburetor. Um, but even there, the drivetrains are changing. Um, I was down in Florida, rented a car, and the car I asked for they didn't have, so they gave me another car, and I had probably driven 50 miles before I realized, oh, this is a plug-in hybrid. And it was sort of when I noticed that the gas tank wasn't going down at all, that I was running on full charge and was completely unaware of it. And I think it's these sort of things that to know and frankly to accept that the old model of purely mechanical vehicles has been gone a long time. Our cars are rolling computers. Certainly, our planes are highly dependent on information technology, on computers for everything that we do in terms of mobility. And so it's understanding and accepting and then staying apace with how the information technology is evolving. I have no real idea how AI is going to change mobility. I have some guesses and some thoughts, and I've read some things, but I'm not sure any of us have a real great sense as to what the ultimate ramifications are going to be, but they're certainly there. Um, and so, connected vehicles, predictive mapping, so that your mapping app not only gives you a route, but predicts what's going to be the most efficient way to get you there, um, in ways that we're not really necessarily, at least a lot of us aren't thinking about right now. But I think that's the thing, is we need to think about what those applications are and how they're going to affect how we design and build vehicles and regulate vehicles going forward. Because I think if AI does, significantly penetrate the mobility space, there's going to be a push to regulate how that is. I think folks won't be comfortable if we're relying solely on the bots to give us our route and operate the vehicle and operate the climate change in the climate control in the vehicle and all of these things, without some guardrails there.
You bring up a very valid point around the regulatory aspect. So on the Q1 2026 earnings calls, Miss Mary Barr, CEO and chair of GM, she very publicly touted that 90% of the autonomous driving code that GM shipped that quarter was written by AI. And then I'm sitting there, I'm applauding Miss Barr and the team at GM, really great work. And then the other part of me and this part of the brain saying, oh boy, you're going to get someone that's going to demand regulation for that, which makes the DC chapter so interesting, because you get professionals from academia, you get professionals from policy, from industry. What are some of those conversations like in the DC chapter, where you're bringing all these individuals together from different backgrounds with different strengths?
It's interesting because I think, maybe DC more so than any other chapter, because the city is so focused on policy. You have those sort of discussions that you may not necessarily have in other places. And you mentioned that there are folks in industry, in government. There's also a lot of movement between those. I mean, I have colleagues, we have members who worked for OEMs or worked for airplane manufacturers who are now with the administration, or worked in a previous administration and are now working for um, the safety industry, or working for manufacturers. And so I think for those folks, I mean, one of the things we have at all of our monthly board meetings is a discussion with our technical chair. So we have a technical chair who pays attention to what's going on in the regulatory space, what's going on in terms of SAE standards and provides a quick briefing to the group about open comment periods and these sort of things where they may want to, either in their personal capacity or for their whatever organization they're working for, prepare comments for those decision-making bodies, whether they're within or outside of SAE. And I think that I don't know, but I expect that is unique to our section in terms of that focus on policy and helping to inform it.
I would say this way, you get a great purview into policy from the chapter perspective. You're chair of the chapter. Why did you want to become chair of this? I'll say this very important chapter.
So I had been just a member for many years and wasn't very active in the chapter. And then in the late 20-teens, I attended a few of the section events and got more involved with the board. Started helping out on the educational side with some of our K through 12 work. Started providing judges to provide community awards for local science fairs, and was very much enjoying that because I'm very much of a fan of supporting education, both in my professional and personal capacity, and the science fairs were a fun way to do that, to meet some of these up and coming engineers who are just phenomenal. I mean, some of these high schoolers and middle schoolers that we've met are doing incredible work, and if I could, some of them I hired them today if I were able. They're just pretty amazing, and so that was great. And then as I was attending more of the board meetings and getting involved with more of the functions and the day in day out work of the board, just realized that wanted to be more active and more supportive, and we had a shift where they needed someone to step in as chair, and I was happy to raise my hand. And I've been doing it for a couple of years now, and we're looking to shift other folks into some of our officer roles. But I think it's definitely been valuable for me. I've learned a lot more about the members of the section, the members of the board, their strengths, their knowledge, and their interests, and the things that get them going, and just helping to engage them more. And one of the things that has been a piece of the DC section chair is organizing volunteers for the government industry meeting, which is one of SAE's biggest events, but it's certainly the marquee event for us here in DC in terms of that meeting and bringing together practitioners on both sides of that policy space. And so we provide volunteers to help support with logistics and to introduce the panels, and folks are, I think, most interested in volunteering with the panels that are most directly connected to their work and their interests. And so I've really learned what folks in our section care about in terms of those policy and those technology aspects.
I personally feel that GI is a wonderful event. It's an incredible way to interact with folks, to learn new things. I've gone to GI and have conversations on one moment with a safety advocate and the next moment with an economist in the oil industry. It's just this really fascinating, diverse conversation. So from a chapter standpoint, you get involved in local science fairs. How else does the chapter get involved in the local community? And I say that because you've got a lot of assets. You got the Smithsonian's, you have world-class museums, you have beautiful things in Virginia. How else does the chapter get involved in the local community?
One of the big things we do, and this ties to government industry, is we provide sponsorship for a lot of the local student competitions in SAE, whether that's Formula or Baja or the electric vehicle or Hyperloop. And the idea is, a lot of the fundraising we do goes to provide some sponsorship to help those students build and design and build their vehicles. And that's really neat because it allows us to connect with the students at the University of Maryland, George Mason University, Johns Hopkins. A lot of the schools around the area have a team for at least one of these competitions. And so the idea is the last few years, we've been able to invite them to government industry to showcase their teams, have them meet the professional engineers, build their contacts, especially as they get closer to graduation, hopefully encourage them to stay connected with SAE and to show off their work, their vehicles, and then we get to hand them a big check, take a few photos, and provide them that sponsorship. And that's been really rewarding. And one of the things we've done the last couple of years is a mock design review. So for the actual competition, whether it's, for example, the Baja, they do the physical competition, the racing, all of the safety and performance tests, but then they also have to give a design presentation to the team of judges at that competition. And one of the things that Scott, who's our student outreach chair, realized is that a lot of times that presentation is prepared the night before, after midnight, because they've spent so much time working on the vehicle. And that we just thought there were ways to improve that process. And one of the things we do is, as part of the sponsorship, we hold this competition, and the groups that provide the best preview of their presentation to us at government industry get an additional support in terms of additional sponsorship. And it allows them to do a practice run of their presentation, work out the kinks, so that hopefully they represent themselves better when they actually get to that competition at the end of the year. And that's been really neat to see how they think about their design process, how they think about engineering their vehicles. And it's been really neat just to meet and to discuss in even more detail what these students are doing. So that's a big thing that's a big part of the DC section in terms of our student support. And so one of the things we do for that to raise money is every year we have a charity golf outing where we raise funds. And so this year we'll be doing that at Stonewall Golf in Virginia on September 28th. So if anybody is in the area and is interested, please join us there. We would love to have you, and hopefully we'll have some of our students there as well. You can meet with them and talk to them about their projects. A few of the other things we do, we've done sort of more social outings, but still at least somewhat mobility related. A couple of years ago, we got a group together to tour the Air and Space Museum and look particularly at the Apollo 11 and basically the moon landing section. Last year, the International Spy Museum had a special exhibit on the vehicles from the James Bond movies, and so we went and saw those, and that was a lot of fun. Maybe a little off to the side in terms of actual mobility engineering, but even there it was neat to learn about how some of these different vehicles are created, and how different versions of the same vehicle before and after it's been sort of run through the ringer. And how some of that is physical damage to the vehicle, and how some of it is sort of manufactured by the props folks to make it look like it's been driven into a wall. It was neat, and it was enjoyable, and just another way for the members to socialize.
And to me, one of the highlights, and unfortunately, it's in the stairwell. You have to go in the stairwell for this. They have one of the original patent blow-up tanks that helped us win World War II. That's in the Spy Museum as well.
Yes, yes, and yeah, and it's actually an interesting thing is just in terms of the intersection of policy and mobility that we haven't talked about is just we've got the folks who work at the various agencies, but then you also have the military and that connection with DC, and a lot of um, mobility engineering is very much focused and driven by the needs of the military. And one of the things I learned pretty early on in my career was that one of the biggest costs in terms of a forward operation is the fuel. Just getting the fuel, actually just getting the fuel to use it, but also protecting those fuel lines, those shipping lines. I think it's something we all, I think, learned in more detail in the second Iraq War and Afghanistan, just how vulnerable those fuel shipments are and how dependent the fighters are on them, and thus how valuable things like fuel efficiency are. You don't necessarily think about, do I want my tank to be fuel efficient? But you really do, just because then you need less fuel to run the thing, and thus you need less fuel shipments. And so that's been sort of interesting to learn through my career, is just what it means for the military, and then what that means for policy in terms of improving efficiency, improving safety, these sort of things.
It's the supply chain. If you look at it from the military, you have to go from the barracks to the front line. It's I think one of the key things, at least from in my humble perspective, for engineers, is understanding supply chain and all the dynamics. I know it's massively complicated, but I feel that it gives you a massive competitive advantage to trying to solve a problem if you understand the supply chains, especially around the origins of things. And that's the beauty of the SAE chapters, is because individuals from all sorts of different backgrounds get involved and have conversations in a neutral, welcoming environment. For an individual that's listening or watching this and saying, okay, well, I've thought about getting involved. I might want to get involved. What would you say to them? What would be the hook to say, okay, roll up your sleeves and come join a chapter?
Well, I think it's one of those things, and it's said about Washington, but I think it's true everywhere, but definitely true of Washington, is it's not what you know, it's who you know, in the sense of, whether it's supply chains or regulation or what have you. We talked about having so many moving parts. There are so many people that have a piece of whatever problem you're trying to solve, whether it's an engineering problem or a policy problem. And it's really, really helpful just to know those people. And and I think that's one of the great things about SAE meetings, but then also the SAE sections, is that's where you can really get to know someone who may help you solve that problem, whatever it is you're trying to figure out. And so building those networks, again, I think that's one of the reasons why we want to support our collegiate students and bring them to government industry, is to help them build and grow their networks. But it's valuable for all of us. And you mentioned just the conversations you have at government industry. You don't necessarily know who you're going to run into, and that's the real value. I think of being involved with the society in that sort of way at the local level is, not just who you can call, but who you're going to see next week that you can talk to in person.
Well, it's right. It's about who you know, but then you also have to nurture a relationship, and relationship is about nurturing and giving and taking, and be respectful. Brent, this has been a fascinating conversation. As we look to wrap up, two things. Most importantly, first, where can somebody register for the charity golf tournament? Where can they go to register if they're interested?
You can come to our LinkedIn page, which is, if you search Washington DC SAE section, you will find us. And there's a link to the Top Golf page where you can register. And yeah, we would love to have you. It's September 28th in Virginia.
Let's say if you're in the DC metro area, go support a great cause. And the most important part for you, Brent, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them today?
I would hope folks would just, we've talked about the importance of connections, and I think that's the thing that I value most. Community is really important to me, and I think that building and maintaining a community of professionals who are dedicated to doing good work and dedicated to helping each other out is something really valuable, and something that I would hope would get folks excited.
I would say this way. Half the battle's showing up. Show up, have a wonderful conversation. If you like it, get involved. Today is tomorrow, tomorrow's today. The future is SAE, the DC chapter. Brent, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Grayson, thank you so much. This was great.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.